Hello, I'm Amara Jones, and today is Monday, March 9th. This is Caffeine TV, your daily news brief, here to take you through 3 headline numbers in just 3 minutes, giving you a different take on everything from housing policy to the Real Housewives. The first number up today is 200. According to the Associated Press, that's the number of vehicles in a military convoy and an alliance between Niger and Chad, which have crossed the Nigerian border with the permission of the Nigerian government in order to mount an offensive against Boko Haram. This coalition of the willing couldn't have come together any sooner. That's because over the weekend, Boko Haram declared its fealty to ISIS, declaring itself to be the West African branch of the Islamic State. Now, as we've spoken about here before, Boko Haram is the jihadi extremist organization which kidnapped 200 girls last year and earlier this year massacred 2,000 people in northeastern Nigeria. And quite frankly, the Nigerian government needs all the help that it can get because while Nigeria is Africa's largest economy, its army has more people on the books than it does in uniform, with generals and officers pocketing the difference. And that's why earlier this year, the African Union put together a force of 9,000 troops from across Africa to deal with Boko Haram, but due to a lack of funding for training and organization, the force hasn't come together yet. And that's why Niger and Chad decided that if you want something done, you got to do it yourself. The next number of today is 1,200. That's the number of miles that Florida has in coastline, making it the most vulnerable state in the United States to global warming. But in a WTF moment, the Washington Post today reports that Governor Rick Scott of that state has banned the phrases global warming and climate change from being used by any state agency, including the state's Environmental Protection Agency, blocking it from preparing for what scientists say is an inevitability. Now, what's interesting is that Miami, which is Florida's largest city, is already spending $400 million to prepare for flooding and to up its defenses against the sea. And insurance companies in Florida are already mandating changes for Florida residents based on their assumption that climate change is a reality. But Governor Scott is having none of it. Now, people thought that things might get better when he met with a panel of scientists earlier this month, but afterwards, after seeing the evidence, he decided to stick his head in the sand, which Florida has a lot of. But it only brought to mind for me the idea that maybe Florida voters should print up some t-shirts with the phrase that I often say, which is that you can't solve a problem that you don't admit. The last number up today is $785 billion. Now, that's the amount in market capitalization that Apple is worth, making it the largest company in the world by market capitalization. And just days ago, we learned that Apple will replace AT&T on the Dow Jones Industrial Average and the New York Stock Exchange in the latest sign of its global dominance. Now, one of the ways in which Apple has become such a behemoth is that it's been able to convince hundreds of millions of people around the world to spend hundreds of dollars on devices that they didn't know that they needed until Apple told them so. And later today, that prowess will be on display with the rollout of the Apple Watch, which will allow users to not only tell time and send text, but as a piece of wearable technology will also do things like measure your heart rate and figure out whether or not you have diabetes and what time you go to bed and wake up in the morning. Now, what's interesting is that in this age of Edward Snowden, when we know that our information is turned over to the government for monitoring purposes, whether or not people will be willing to continue to trade privacy for the latest piece of hardware. But honestly, given Apple's track record, I wouldn't bet against them.